Hey, it's TDA and welcome to episode 3 of our Proliferation run. And as the sun rises over our little planet, we have a lot of work to do still. We are going to do a few things this episode. I am going to try to keep these episodes a little shorter than the end of my last run, but then again, it's me, so who knows how short is actually going to be. But what we're going to do today is we are going to expand our mall a little bit. What are we going to be building? Well, we are going to use our Mark 1 sorters in order to make, surprise, surprise, Mark 2 sorters. And as you can see, it's a little small addition, very simple, straightforward to our existing mall. And unlike our previous run where we started every single item from scratch, from base materials, I am going to use the intermediate productions in this specific run because it's a lot more efficient and it is pretty much a way to avoid your proliferation becomes a nightmare. We have everything proliferated. Speaking of which, I just realized we should actually probably proliferate this belt as well. So let me do that and fiddle around with that a bit before we continue. And there we go. Now we have proliferated Mark 1 sorters going in there, and that means that we are now getting bonus units being produced for our Mark 2 sorters. So, one thing to note, as you can see, this production goes really fast. What you can do if you want to upgrade all your sorters really quickly, you use the mass upgrade tool. So this is the F2 short key. You make sure you only select sorters. Doesn't really matter for now, but generally speaking, it can be useful to kind of make sure you know what you're doing. And then you can go something like this. Whoosh. And same thing over here. And now, congrats, our entire mall has Mark II sorters. And of course, the Mark I sorters are being replaced by Mark II sorters, but you get them back in your inventory. So what you can do is basically put them back in the box, and that way they won't go to waste because they are going to be turned into Mark II sorters at some point. Yeah, so that is that little tiny bit build for now. What we are also going to do is we are going to work on our red science, and honestly I was looking around and my conclusion was we don't have oil in any way or form convenient position compared to where we are. It's not the worst thing in the world, but for some reason in this seed, pretty much all your ore is in this tiny little area, which honestly is not the worst thing in the world. It's kind of nice to have everything close at hand. But at the same time, the oil is all on the other side of the planet. At least the majority of it. Now, we do have a few veins, or seeps, I should say, over here. Quite a few, actually. They're kind of on the wrong half of the planet, so to speak, but we can take advantage of that because I particularly like this position over here, so this little island. We actually have coal there as well, so proliferation time, obviously. So we are going to transform this into our red science production area. So let me walk over there, let's start some basic production going, and then let's talk about math. Okay, so this is the point in the video where my wife is asking me, okay, you just told them you're gonna do math and you expect them to still be watching? Yeah, well, I'm an actuary, I do crazy stuff like that. So, math. Energy matrix, what do we need for that? We are going to need a bunch of graphite for that, which is something we haven't crafted yet. And we are going to need a bunch of hydrogen for that. Graphite, very straightforward, you just make it from coal, and we happen to have a lot of coal next to us, which is not only useful, of course, for the proliferation, but also for the graphite in this case. Now, the second thing we are going to need is the hydrogen, which, as you probably are aware of by now, is made from plasma refining, at least at this point in the game. And it is actually a pretty slow recipe. So we get some refined oil from that recipe, but we also get some hydrogen, but just one per 4 seconds. So what do we want to do? Well, we are going to want to produce about 3 red signs per second. I like that ratio for several reasons. I actually used it in my previous runs as well, but I'm gonna be using it for a different reason now, and it will take some time for you to see that maybe, but don't worry, it will come. Anyway, so in order to make 24. Sorry, we're going to need 24 refineries making hydrogen and oil. Why? Because if we have 24, if you divide that by 4, that is 6. So that means we have 6 hydrogen per second coming in. Because the 1 per 4 seconds times 24 is 6 per second in terms of hydrogen. We have no use for the oil at the moment, but don't worry, that will come. But for now, we're focusing on the hydrogen. Now, with 6 per second, that means that we have exactly half of this production speed in terms of energy matrices. So if we put in 6 per second, because it's a 2-to-1 ratio, assuming we also supply 6 graphite per second, we will be able to produce exactly 3 energy matrix per second. Now, how do we do that? Well, 24 is going to be quite a bit of a thing. So we are going to make use of the blueprint mechanic, and I'm actually going to show you how to do that. Did I bring my refineries? No, of course I didn't. So be right back to pick them up, and then we'll get started on the build. Okay, and while I was waiting for the sun to rise, I set up some power over here. I also connected that with some power lines to our main grid. Because we were actually kind of lowish on power. We had barely enough to support our factory, which is of course not helped by the fact that we were proliferating pretty much everything, which draws a lot of power. But now we can start working towards our little build. Now, what do we need? Like we said, we need 24 refineries making oil and hydrogen. And let me make sure I don't run into any spacing issues. I think we should be fine if we build it something like over here. Here? Yes, why not? Okay, so we are going to be using a blueprint trick, which is the following. We are going to be placing 2 and 2. Is this going to fit a belt in between? Yes, it is, which is really nice. And we are going to be exporting over here and over here. Let's see, this is 1, 2, 1 less will do, and same here, 1, 2, yes. And we can remove this one as well. And what we are also going to do is this, and this, and this, just to make it complete. And then we have a second belt over here, and don't worry, I will explain what I'm doing in a second, just to need to make sure I get this right. There we go. And there we go. Another belt like this. And then we have a second belt over here. Now, TDA, what the hell are you doing? Well, I am setting up a facility so that I can bring in 2 belts of raw oil. So these are going to be belts supplying crude oil. That's the word I was looking for. A full belt, so 6 of it. Same thing over here, so 6 of it. And then of course we are going to bring that into our refineries like this. And then these refineries are going to refine the plasma. And as you can see, this is going to be producing 2 different items, which is always a bit annoying because you don't want 2 different items on the same belt. There we go. Now let me turn off the blinking lights there for a moment. Okay, so how do we build this type of facility so large that we don't have 4, we have 24, so we actually need to do this 6 more times? Well, we are going to do it like this. So when you put down a sorter from a building that you already set the recipe in, that is important, you need to set the recipe first, you get a filter automatically, and if you press tab, you can select which item you want to filter through this sorter. So if you put it to none, it will simply put all the hydrogen and the oil on the same belt, and that might be what you want. But if you simply set it to hydrogen, like this, and I actually didn't do it on this one, so let me repeat that. Why are you not cooperating with me? There we go. Tap hydrogen. And it's a bit hard to tell, but if you zoom in, you can see this is a sorter specifically for hydrogen. And then on the other side, we are going to put the refined oil. And once again, refined oil. And then we are going to be putting this on this belt. Like so. You don't need to set a sorter on this, because of course this is always going to be oil, because we set the filter on here and we set the filter on here. So these are the oil belts. And then we do the same thing here. So hydrogen, hydrogen, oil, oil, and then last but not least, these two connections. Now, what will this do? This will ensure that we have all the hydrogen going on this belt and then on this belt. And we have all the hydrogen, the same thing on the inner belt over here. And then the oil will be put on this tiny little belt and then hop over and go on this belt. Now, of course, you can do this with a bridge or whatever, but I kind of like this whole sorter setup. You've seen me use it before if you watched the previous run. I just like it. That just looks really cool. Now, we also, of course, also need to power this stuff. So we are going to do that like so. And yeah. That is 4. Now we need 24. How can we do that? Well, you can select this. And I do think I need to tone this down just a wee bit. There we go. I think this should work if I did my math correctly. There we go. Use now. We don't actually need to save the blueprint. We can simply set it like this. And because we took special note on how long our belts was, you can actually connect the belts. So now we have 8, 12, 24, 16, 20, 24. And that is a nice row of 24 hydrogen facilities or refineries, however you want to call it. 6, yes, 24. I did my math correctly. Yay! And that is half of our production. Now, of course, we do need to supply this with oil. And remember, we have a large amount of that down here. We need 12 in total. So as you can see, we're almost going to be using all of this, which is not a problem because we might as well do that. But because we are also going to be producing 8 ton, and I do mean 8 ton of oil, but we're not actually going to be using. We do need to be a little smart about that because we need to store that, and we will be doing that in a moment. This doesn't actually need to be here, so remember we were going for an exact belt of 6 hydrogen per second, so we can actually combine these belts. And then we have our hydrogen belt over here, and we can bring in our belts with oil over here. And what I want to do with those is the following. And we are actually going to do something that might seem a bit counterintuitive initially, but we are going to make some storage over here. Now, before we do that, we also need to set up some pretty simple, straightforward production for graphite. And remember, always bring your wireless power towers in case you become low on power, especially with larger builds like this, because you plop them down and whoop, hello power. Anyway, yeah, the production for graphite is going to be really simple, really straightforward. Actually, this is not correct. Let's nicely align that with this one. Might as well put it next to it. Why not? No, let's do it like this. Yes, being tidy is a thing. So, how many graphite smelts do we need? We need 6 per second. And if you look at graphite, it is being produced at 1 per 2 seconds. So 6 of these is not going to cut it, which also means that we need a belt in between, but we can also fit twice as much smelters on a single 6 Mark 1 belt, 6 second per second belt. Why? Because of course this is only taking in it's actually taking in 1 coal per second, so we need to have a second belt supplying that. So that means this all needs to move up. And we are going to do that like this because it's nice and symmetric, and I like that. And then we have a outgoing belt over here. And once again, we can combine that into one single belt. And I like to do it like this. And we are actually going to have that go all the way straight through like this. Now, we of course need to hook it up with sorters. We need to connect the coal, so I'm going to do that, and then we can meet right back here. Okay guys, as you can see, I caved. I couldn't take it any longer. I had to put in foundations. I mean, how much more better? Anyway, how much better does this look with foundations and some nice lining around it compared to just building on the normal ground floor? Much better, right? I know. Even if you don't agree with me, you should be agreeing with me anyway. Foundations are a thing once again in this playthrough. I couldn't take it. I also put down the foundations around a little proliferation build. I put in a belt to make sure we are proliferating the inputs on both sides. We are proliferating the outputs on both sides. And I didn't actually connect up the belts just yet. Why not? Because I wanted to make sure we were proliferating everything first. So at this point we can. I also made sure, of course, that we have all the miners going. And once again, usually people ask me, how are you powering all of this stuff? Well, I put in a lot of power. Wind turbines at this point, no solar panels just yet. But basically, I'm going to be trying to use the poles on both sides for massive power production. So we have a wind turbine factory over there. We have a wind turbine area over here. Something that's probably worth noting is that, as you can see, I hooked up 3 different oil seeps to each belt. So there's 3 over here, 3 over there. That is more than that can actually be put on a belt normally. There's a slight overproduction here. It's about 8 per second rather than 6 per second. And the main reason I did that is that by doing this, this will allow us to make sure that this production speed keeps up to full speed, even after the slow reduction of the oil production is starting to kick in. So oil is not infinite like some people think. Well, technically it sort of is, because it will slow down, but it will never actually 100% run out. But it will slow down to a speed that is pretty much close to 0 anyway. So even though you start out with like 2 or 3 per second speed after a couple of hours playtime, and it's quite a lot of hours, don't get me wrong, but it will start slowly to tick down. And I think it halves every 12 or 24 hours or something like that. Sounds like a lot, but in this game that's actually not that lot. It's not going to be a problem. By the time it runs out, we'll be localizing us in different star systems and things like that. But yeah, that's why there's 3, so we don't have to worry about the reduction of speed. So what do we need to do? We actually do need to hook this up. I'm actually almost out of belts. That's interesting. And there we go. And now we should see this all nicely working. We actually have enough power for this as well. At least I assume so. There's 1 belt too many in there. Let's clean that up. And as you can see, the sorting mechanism is doing its job. So we have all the oil going on one belt, all the hydrogen going on a different belt. And last but not least, over here, the output is going to be collected in 2 different areas. So the main belt is going to go through, and this is going to be hydrogen. Oh, hello, Mudstone. And then the other stuff is going to go in the storage units over here, because we don't have any use for the oil. I just want to show you what happens if you output the oil again. So note that this is proliferated, and we're now storing it in a liquid storage. But even if you then take it out again, the game will remember that this is actually proliferated stuff. So you don't have to worry about storage kind of messing up the whole fact that you had some proliferation going on. So that is really nice. I actually didn't expect it to work like that. At least, of course, I know by now, but when it was first announced. So yeah, a really great thing that the developers took. The same thing applies when you transport it across planets, into your ILS, into normal storage units, in your inventory. Doesn't matter, it will always remember that it is actually proliferated. Well then, we now have all the basics that we need in order to get some science. So what we're going to do is we're going to find a good spot for our little science facility, and then we're going to wrap this up. Okay guys, just one little tip in case you want to use it. You can easily give your your power production a huge boost by putting in the thermal facilities in order to siphon off the oil production that you're making. Now, should you do this? Not entirely sure, because of course you're wasting a precious resource like this, and you're also making sure that your power now heavily relies upon actually having this power up and running. So if at any point in the game you run out of oil, or you run lower on oil, which will happen of course, like I explained just before, then you could get into a situation where suddenly your system is now underpowered again, and if it goes really bad, you could actually get to the point where if your power production is too low, your entire facility shuts down. Kind of a doom scenario, but I did have it happen when I used thermal energy quite a lot, so be careful about how you use it. But anyway, it's an option. Here you can use it. Now, the really cool thing about proliferated resources that are used in burning, for some reason this is the unproliferated version, so as you can see, refined oil normally gives you 4.5 megajoules of energy. Now let's delete that and pick up something that is proliferated. As you can see, it's now 5.06 megajoules, so it gets a significant boost, and actually you also get a boost to the fuel chamber generation. So anything you put in your mech to actually power your mech, so like graphite or coal, whatever, ideally you want that to be proliferated as well, so you get a boost of the energy, so you are basically being more efficient with the power for your mech. Anyway, just a little example. Use it if you want, don't use it if you want to be careful about using thermal energy and not wasting your resources, but it's an option. Here you have it. Now let's get on with the build. Okay, so while I'm building this and we're making this little science hub close to our original facility, I removed this blue science hub over here. I put in some splitters in order to split off half of the production. It's probably going to be most of the production, considering the rest isn't being used. We're relocating our blue science to these facilities, and by putting down, sorry about that, by putting down 9 of these science hubs, we are able to produce 3 per second, and then when we put down 18 of these, we are able to produce 3 red science per second as well. Why can't I copy this? I'm too far away, apparently. There we go. Just to confirm, once again, math, you know, stuff. 18 divided by the amount of time it takes to create 1. So we have 18 facilities producing 1 item per 6 seconds. So 18 divided by 6 is 3. So then you know, hey, we're producing 3 per second. And the same basic logic applies to the blue science. This is producing at a 3 per second speed. So if we have 9, then once again 9 divided by 3 is 3. So we also have 3 per second. You don't necessarily need to make sure it's 3 science per second on each type of science, but I like having it kind of even numbers, and a lot of the research that we're going to do does use the red and blue science in equal amounts. So in the end, it doesn't really matter that much, because we are going to have some research that needs more of one type, some it needs more of the other, etc. So it's not really relevant. If you want to keep it to different ratios, that should work just fine. What I do recommend you do at this point is put in the box, and as we've done before, have an ingoing and an outgoing, an ingoing and an outgoing. And why is that? That allows you to stock up some of the research while we're producing it, and we will get to the point where we're not actually using the research at all for our current science, but we are going to add in new science on top of that, and suddenly we also need blue and red science again. So if you look at some of the later game recipes, for example the logistics system, it will need 1200 of each, so that's quite a lot, but only 120 of yellow. So we can make that 1200 easily while we're working towards the yellow science, and by doing that we're kind of prepared. That is actually a reason why you might want to put in more of these research stations. I'm actually not doing that because, first of all, we're going to be researching vertical building or construction. There we go. And as you can see, this will allow us to kind of stack up layers of the labs and storage. So by just researching this, we can stack up so much more that it's pretty much the same as building more towers next to each other. So, and once again, I think I mentioned this in the previous episode as well, the research speed itself does not actually matter that much. Since you'll be working towards the next few steps, by the time you made one or more, two more builds, you'll be done with all the research anyway. So fast research is not necessarily a big target. Making sure you actually have the research, that's the main thing you should be focusing on. Okay, now I do need to hook all of this up to power. There's a lot of belts to still create, and of course we need to put in the proliferation, and since this takes forever to build, not being helped by the fact I'm standing as far away as possible from everywhere I'm building. So when you're building this yourself, make sure you kind of keep your map close to where you want to build. It really speeds things up a lot. Of course, make sure you keep your power up as well. My power towers are over there. Be right back while I fix that. Okay, now how awesome is this? We have a nicely symmetric build. It is supplied with all kinds of funny, nice neon colors. It is producing two types of signs. It's actually producing it in the same build, and we're also proliferating it. And as you can see, yes, you can proliferate signs as well. And the benefit of that is that you actually get more signs for the same price. So why not? I mean, all we are doing is taking a little bit of coal, turning it into proliferation, and then get a nice science boost. Now, in terms of this build, you don't need to do it like this, but I will supply a blueprint just in case you like the prettiness of this build. Of course, I did replace the initial blue science production from our build over there and replace it, etc. If you want to keep it like that, that's fine. I think this is a pretty nice, efficient build, and we're kind of working slowly towards our later game type of builds. Especially now that we have access to the red science, this opens up a ton of new stuff to do. So in terms of where you should start with your blueprints, I highly recommend that you make sure you focus on the Mecha Core level 2, because that will allow you to get the drive engine, and then you can sail. That's so much fun. You can go to different planets. Which brings me to the next thing I recommend that you research is the titanium production, because of course we will be needing to get titanium from another planet. And other than that, after that, it really doesn't matter that much. But I do also recommend that one of the first things you grab is the next level of mass construction, so you can use even larger blueprints, because I'm going to be using blueprints. So if you don't want to use them, I am going to assume that from this point on you do have the level 3 one, which has 900 facilities. So make sure you grab it, and then after that just make sure you grab everything else. There's awesome stuff. You can get more drones, you can get faster drones, as you can see over here. That will speed up your building speed by, I don't know, like 100%, probably something along those lines. So make sure you grab that, and there is a ton of new technology on the other tree as well for new materials and things like that, so you want to grab them all anyway. So make sure you do that. I hope you really enjoyed that one. Look, it looks way worse in daylight, but still looks pretty cool still. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to catch you in the next one.